Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Well, we have a winner. For those that haven't been following my channel, you really should. You should like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I know this is about small block Chevys for this video, but if you have a different make or model, I probably will eventually talk about that engine as well. Maybe even do dyno tests with that. But this one's strictly about the small block Chevy dyno test with the intake manifolds. So let me just recap. I had a 406 small block Chevy built as a dyno mule just to test different ideas on the dyno. It's 11.2 compression ratio. It has AFR Enforcer 195 heads. Then the only thing that was changed was put a solid roller spring on. It has an Urson solid roller can with a 260, 270 duration at 50 thousandths, 108 lobe separation, 685 lift. It has 1,000 CFM race demon carburetor. It was redone by Mark Whitener. And that's pretty much the gist of the engine. And the only thing that really was changed was manifolds. So far, with that set of heads, and we're done with that set of heads now, 23 different intake manifold ideas or manifolds themselves were tested. In other words, there were 23 tests done for manifolds. 23. And one of these two is the winner. So let's talk about the two manifolds and the reason why they were chosen. Early on when I did my first video session, because these two are tested in dyno session 3. So this is the third session to test, and these were tested. And the reason for it is several people wanted to know how the lower ones did comparison to some of the more racier ones that have a higher pad height. In other words, these are actually shorter than most of the ones you would see. What we have here is a Victor Jr., very popular. Most people know what that is, 2975. This is a YN, a Team G. To my knowledge, I don't think they sell these anymore. They may, but I'm not for sure that they do. When I was younger, I remember that the Team G, everybody claimed was much better than the Victor Jr., and a lot of people had ran them. This is before everybody had it dynos everywhere, and you could just go test. And I don't remember there even being individual dyno tests to see which one did. But both got tested. Both have a really low carb height. They're about 1 inch shorter, say, than your Super Victor, but these would fit under most hoods. Now, there's one other manifold that I wanted to test, but it simply did not come in because UPS kind of screwed the ball on that deal. And that was an AFR 4812. It's actually the same height as this Edelbrock Victor Jr. It has longer dividers, and it's got a clover leaf in it. Would love to have tested it, just didn't come in time. It's the only one that did not get tested that would have probably made things interesting. One of these two beat all other 23 ideas tested, and that was the Victor Jr. I'll go ahead and straight out say, when this whole thing got started and I started testing, I wasn't even going to bother with the Victor Jr. because I thought there was no way it could even beat the Super Victor, because I've never seen a test ever where a Victor Jr. had beat it, period, at all. So the idea that it was going to beat everything that we tested just seemed dumb. Well, a viewer actually sent this one in, and it is port matched. I do want to talk about that because I don't want to think it's completely stock. You can see it's port matched. Now, this is port matched to a 1206. I'm going to show you the heads because some of you are like, well, that's why it did better. But we've had other ones that were port matched as well. It didn't do well. Now, that's port matched to a 1206. This is not the AFR Enforcer head. It's one exactly like it. It just doesn't have 8mm stems. In other words, it's the same head, just different stem diameters. This, in case you're wondering, would be like if you get a Salt Racing head or the DNA head, it's the exact same head, just AFR Enforcers use 8mm stuff. But I want to show you this. This is a 1206 gasket, and that's the stock ports. Now, the AFR Enforcers, what I told you, were completely stock, so they didn't have any work done to them whatsoever. So, since they didn't have any work done, this is what they look like. This opening you see here, this 1206 gasket, that's what the intake fit like on the heads. So it's much larger than what the heads are. And before you think, well, that's the magic ticket, that's what you should have done on the other tests, there are other ones that were port matched or just came out of the box that had a larger opening than the head. So many of them actually, very few were actually smaller than this opening. So of the ones that were larger, it didn't seem like it made any difference at all. So, I mean, some difference, but point being is that port opening did not give it the advantage you're probably thinking. It's something else. So let's kind of get to the results and the numbers and stuff. Here's my papers. This is the Team G. I really thought it'd be the magic ticket. It just kind of wasn't. By the way, several of you are probably going to ask, well, you've done books for others. You could do a book for this because this is from version 3. This is dyno session 3. I will. I just haven't yet. So eventually I'll get to that. I just haven't done it yet, but I will put out a book. It's probably one of the cheapest books that I put out, just because in session 3 we only did 20 tests. So here we go. The Team G, you're looking at it, made 545 horsepower and 523 torque, 525 at 4,700. So you're like, that's not bad. It's not bad, right? Pretty good. But let's compare it to the winner of the whole thing. Here's your Edelbrock Victor Jr. 571.5 horsepower, 540 foot-pounds of torque. This one was the only, of all the manifolds, the only one that cracked 570, period. Nobody else did it. So, wow. So how does these compare? We'll keep going on. Let's just see if I can't turn the pages. Probably should have separated these. Just to give you an idea, this is an Edelbrock Super Victor. This is the one that I actually thought was going to crush. Sorry, my nose has decided at this one moment it wants to try running away. And I'm not doing 2 takes. All right. This is the Edelbrock Super Victor. This is the one I actually thought would beat the Victor Jr. Because, like I said, I've never seen it done. This, the stock Super Victor, compare it. 549, 570. And again, the torque's not even close. So, which to me is very, very strange. That seemed odd that it even did that. Not even close. Don't worry about these pictures, by the way. I promise you I'll make a book, and if you want to purchase that, you can see them much easier. This was the best Super Victor we did, and what I did with this one was, if you remember, and you have to watch some of my previous videos, I tested if you burr finish the manifold and then if you cartridge roll it. So this was the best Super Victor. So, and it was modified, so this is not stock. We messed with finishes to see what it would do. You can go back and watch other videos on that. If you look at it, it made 565 and 530 torque. So that the Victor Jr., besides the port match, destroyed it. So, weird. Now, you're like, well, that's great. We can barely see the numbers. That's your fault. Let's just look at overlays, because probably on your screen as you're looking at it, this would be easier to see. And this is where you'll start seeing it. This is the Victor Jr. versus Team G. The Victor Jr. is in red, and the Team G is in black. It stomped it. It literally crushed it everywhere. There's no spot it didn't. And some of you are like, you should have pulled it down lower. No, I've talked about it in other videos. No, not this one. So that's that. Let's go on and compare, look at other comparisons with it. Of course, these pages are stuck together. There we go. This is the best case scenario. So this is your Edelbrock Victor Jr. That's the black. The red is the Super Victor that's got a 40 grit. So this is modified 40 grit. And you can see it still beat it everywhere. Pretty good. So let's look at other comparisons. This, what we have here is the Victor Jr., the burr finish, and the 40 grit. So 2 other Super Victors put together with the Victor Jr. on there, and still you get the idea. It's just better, especially down low. And we got some more comparisons. This one you might find even the most interesting, and the reason why I haven't wrote these up here is because, well, I didn't have time. But what I want to show you is this. You see this black line? That's the Victor Jr. You see all the other lines? It doesn't really matter what they are, except for to say this. Every one of these other lines are dual planes. The black line is the single plane Victor Jr. So if you look here, of course, we started the pool, say, around 44 on some of them, but most of them started at 45. It beats 1, 2, 3 of the dual planes at the lower RPMs. And then you can tell how much better it is up top. And this may explain why if you ever have a Victor Jr. on a car, you're like, man, it runs so much faster at the track. There's your winner. It made more torque too, because a lot of people want to say, well, dual planes make more torque. Not in this case, it didn't. So there's that. Now, after doing all this testing, and trust me, I was thoroughly confused on why it did this, I looked at all the measurements. And if you're thinking, well, it's because the runner links are shorter, or because the runner links have more, the line of sight's better, or because it has better taper. I looked at all of that. Here's what I could show you. So I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff just to kind of collect all the data to see where it lined up. If you think, well, you know, that manifold did better because, and by the way, this is going to be in book 3. That manifold did better because it had a longer runner. Actually, it didn't. It was only 5 inches. The shorter one was Team G. And there were some of them that were about that. Like, look, the Holley 30110 is 5.26. So it's not the shortest. Okay, what about, okay, it must be the reason why it did better is because it had less cross-section. Okay. Well, if you look at this is the opening area. 3.28, well, Team G had 2.69. There are others like that, the Holley 3.5, that's not that far off. There are several that were really close or even smaller. So that wasn't it. Then you have this is what I have for taper degrees of taper. And I did this from the push rod pinch, which would be here. That's the smallest part to the opening of the manifold there. That gives me, and then I measure the length and you have the degrees. So if I look at it, the Victor Jr. is 5.19 degrees of taper. That's large. If you look at the Team G, it's hardly any taper at 3 point something. And then you have others like 3.71 from the Hurricane. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're thinking it's just one factor or that makes it the best, like it's the shortest, so that's why it was the best in that. Or it was they had the biggest opening, it was the best of that. Or the smallest opening, it wasn't. And I've said this before, with manifolds and cylinder heads itself, you cannot look at just one factor and say that's the reason why this manifold is so good. It's a combination of a bunch of things. So this may not have the best line of sight, but it might be decent. But then it has the right runner length or close to the right runner length, maybe not the best. But then it also might have close but not the best opening area or taper. So it's not the best at any one of them, but if you take all the things combined for this combination, that's the thing it liked the most. So when you're porting a manifold, because I'm obviously a porter, when you're porting that stuff, you're looking at not one factor. So everybody's like, well, you got to focus on that taper there. Well, not necessarily. Line of sight can also kind of trump that sometimes or have more precedent in some cases. And sometimes you need more runner length and sometimes less runner length. So it's all those factors combining that make it what it is. You're not going to get, at least currently I've seen, where you have a manifold that has everything 100% the best. The best line of sight, the best length, the best opening area, the best taper. I haven't seen it. Usually it's a blend. It might have one or two of this, but not this. So I know other manifolds are coming out now that Christie or Atco has. It looks like it could be one of the finer pieces. Of course, they're pretty expensive. That may tell me otherwise. But the other thing is it's also application dependent. For this combination with these heads, it like that of all of them. And trust me, going in, I would never have predicted that. Now, what's going to happen next? Because I know some of you want to put in the comments, and you should. You can write whatever you want. What's going to happen next? Well, the heads are off. So these aren't the heads. These just happen to be ones here that I could use for demonstration. The heads are off. The new heads are going on. They are a set of ProMax Project X 215s. Now, they've got a much larger cross-sectional area because this one, if I remember, and it's in my book, but I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I think out of the box, it's only 2 square inches. The ProMax Project X 215s are 2.3, but you got to see this. Over here on the ground, which is kind of hidden away, that's one of the CNC ported Project X 215s. And I know whose port they copied because that person, me, sent it in for them to digitize. So that one's got a cross-section of 2.59 and flows quite a bit more air. So what I'm thinking is going to happen is the next heads will obviously be the stock ProMax Project X 215s. That should change things. I do not think so. Some of the manifolds will obviously be repeated. I don't think that one's going to come out on top anymore. Like, it was great to match with this head because this thing can only move so much air. You shove more air and it just didn't work. I think whenever the other heads go in that flow more, considering these only flowed 270s, the Project X flowed 290 to 300 depending on which runner, the differences are going to change. The manifolds that combination likes is going to change. Now, here's the interesting thing to me. I think the manifold will be better lined up with the cylinder head, not necessarily the cubic inch or the RPM. But I could be wrong. So I usually am. And there's caveats to that too. But I think what's going to happen is whenever those heads change, we'll see that. So especially when we change to the ported one, that's got the bigger cross-section area and stuff too. Also AFR, I think they're trying to send me a set of 227s to test, and that has even a bigger cross-section or maybe bigger or different valve spacing and should move more air. We'll see to compare to that. So A lot of stuff to come to see how the manifolds relate when the heads itself get better, move more air, more cross-sectional area, a bunch of other stuff. And don't be wrong, I'm still going to port the AFR enforcers in stages so we can see what individual parts happen. Because as far as the AFR enforcers, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do just port the exhaust port and then put them back on and see how much power it actually makes for differences. But anyway, a little bit longer of a video to tell you that thing's pretty good. You guys, remember, I'm no Superman, which means I make mistakes and plenty of them. Take care.